There are two ways to deal with a problem. You can wait until it arrives, or you can try to spot it while it's still just a possibility. The rabbits haven't touched these onions, not yet. They might never do, but gardening has a funny way of punishing optimism. You don't always lose crops because you made the wrong decision. Sometimes you lose them because you made the right decision, just a little too late. So today isn't really about onions. It's about building a little insurance policy, using whatever I can find lying around. A few lengths of mesh, a forgotten pile of timber, nothing fancy, just enough to tip the odds back in my favor. You know, I can't remember where half of these pieces of wood came from. An old raised bed, perhaps. A broken pallet. Most of them look like they're past their useful life. But experience has taught me not to be too quick to decide what's useless. Out here, today's scrap has a habit of becoming tomorrow's solution. You just don't always know the problem yet. There's something oddly satisfying about giving old things another chance. Not because they're perfect. The wood is weathered, it's warped. It carries the marks of whatever job it did before. But perfection has never really belonged in an allotment. Most of the things that work well here aren't pristine, they're simply good enough. And more often than not, good enough is exactly what keeps everything growing. I think one of the biggest misconceptions about gardening is that you're in charge. You can build fences, stretch netting, keep the rabbits out. And then the weather changes, or the slugs arrive, or something you've never even considered becomes this year's problem. Maybe that's why I keep coming back. Because gardening isn't really about controlling nature, it's about learning where your influence ends and being surprisingly content with whatever happens beyond it. I've become a lot less attached to having a perfect plan. I used to think the secret was knowing exactly what you were going to do before you started. Now, I'm not so sure. These days I just try to get the first piece in place. Because once something exists in the real world, it starts answering questions that were impossible to solve in my head. Maybe that's true of more than just gardening. Sometimes you don't find the right path by thinking harder. You find it by taking the first step and paying attention to what happens next. I've always enjoyed making things, not because I'm especially good at it. I'm definitely not. It's more that I like the moment when a pile of unrelated bits and pieces stops looking like clutter and starts looking like something with a purpose. It never happens all at once. There's just a point where your brain quietly switches from seeing the individual parts to seeing the whole. I don't think that feeling ever gets old. There's always a moment in a project like this where it stops being an idea and starts becoming a decision. Up until then, everything can be changed. Different lengths of timber, a different design. Start again if you want to. But once it begins coming together, you tend to follow it through. I suppose that's true of a lot of things. The hardest part often isn't building something, it's deciding that this is the version you're going to build. I do sometimes wonder where the line is. How much of gardening is about protecting what you've grown, and how much is about accepting that you'll always have to share some of it? The rabbits aren't doing anything wrong. From their point of view, they've simply found dinner. So this isn't about winning. It's just about making my onions a little less convenient. I've learned not to underestimate the small jobs. They're rarely the ones you tell people about. Nobody comes to admire a bit of mesh or a homemade frame. But they're often the jobs that quietly decide whether the season goes well or doesn't. The harvest usually gets the credit. The preparation rarely does. Not everything needs a purpose today. The pieces I didn't use this time will almost certainly find their moment eventually. That's one of the nice things about an allotment. Very little gets its final chapter. Will it keep the rabbits out? I honestly don't know. I'd like to think so. But gardening has a habit of humbling anyone who becomes too confident. What I do know is that I've given these onions a better chance than they had yesterday. And sometimes, that's all you can really do. You make the best decision you can with the information you've got. Then you let nature have the final say. Maybe that's why growing food never gets boring. No matter how much experience you gain, every season begins with the same quiet question. I wonder how it'll turn out this time. Before I get distracted by something else, let's see how the ants are getting on in the greenhouse. I think that answers that. If you've never seen this before, it probably looks a bit alarming. But this isn't an invasion. It's the start of the next generation. For most of the year, an ant colony keeps itself hidden beneath our feet. Then, for a brief window, it produces winged queens and males, all waiting for exactly the right conditions to leave the nest. It's yet another reminder that there's an entire world carrying on beneath the greenhouse floor, whether I like it or not. Potatoes are interesting because they spend most of their lives completely hidden. With most plants, you can watch the progress. But potatoes keep their secrets underground. For months, you can only imagine what's happening beneath the surface. And then, in a few seconds, the whole story is revealed. Sometimes it's more than you hoped for. Sometimes it's less. But that moment of discovery never really gets old. These are potato berries, the fruit of the potato plant. They aren't something you'd want to eat, but inside each one are seeds that can be used to grow new potato plants. Most potatoes are grown from tubers, the potatoes we dig up and eat, but growing from seed is a completely different process. I'm going to collect some of these and see if I can grow a future crop this way. It probably won't be the quickest route, but that's part of the fun. There's always a moment, just before lifting a potato plant, where you convince yourself this one might be different. Maybe this is the one hiding a generous harvest beneath the soil. Maybe this is the plant that's going to make up for the last one. But the ground has a way of keeping its secrets until the very end. And once again, it seems my imagination was a little more productive than the soil. Still, there's something quite satisfying about uncovering the reality. Because gardening has a funny way of reminding you to appreciate what you have. Every now and then, the allotment gives you exactly what you were hoping for. No disappointment. Just a crop that seems to have decided it is ready. These bulls' blood beetroot have reached that point where they feel just right. Not too big, not too small. The kind of size where you can imagine the meal before you've even taken them home. I think that's one of the most satisfying parts of growing your own food. Not just eating something fresh, but knowing the moment it was ready. And for now, I'll leave it there. There'll be plenty waiting for the next visit.